Something just rubbed me the wrong way about that, dude.
2022 going in?
Yeah, what'd you want to say?
4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Buckle Up, baby. It was right in sync. Buckle Up episode 12, Michael. This is our special New Year's episode, wrapping up 2021, going into 2022. Thoughts?
We started in the summer when it was very hot. Now we're both cold, so we have to wear a jacket.
Freezing.
Pretty wild. It's been probably more than 12 weeks, about 13 weeks. This is episode 12, about 13, 14 weeks.
No. We started this episode like 20 minutes late just to get warm in here.
Yeah. This wasn't the hardest. This was more self-inflicted. We were just kind of lazy today.
Yeah. We actually we did half the podcast off camera just for fun.
Yeah.
That was a waste.
Yeah.
On purpose. We knew.
You know what I'm excited for? Once we get this set up where we leave the mics here, we can just sit down and start talking. All the prelude will be on here because we won't prelude while we're setting up.
Right.
You know what I'm
just
saying?
like the talk. The schmooze before the schmooze?
I open the door, you walk up the stairs, and we sit down and turn the mics on.
You're just trying to get to an effortless place.
Yeah, that is.
Honestly, I love the process. So, thoughts on New Year's. What's interesting is every year this happens, but like every year, it's like a new year. Every year this happens where there's an energy behind New Year's. You feel it, right? Like you feel this sense of like motivation. And also I've been editing this podcast. I say like such a beast, like.
I haven't noticed that.
Well, you're not editing.
Well, I'm also not listening to you.
Yes, you're listening to you. You're like, fuck, I click my mouth too much. But I notice my stuff. You notice your stuff. That's what happens when you're editing. No, Michael has been doing a lot of editing too. The load is split. It's going great. Workflow's good.
You know what I do? I say what I'm gonna say. I start off 3 or 4 times and then I say.
You're like an engine. You rev up and boom. It's like and you launch it. That happens a few times. Yeah. But my point is there is a like invigorating energy behind New Year's every year, right? And the one thing I'm doing differently this year, double checking the recording here. Say hey into your mic.
Hey.
Good. The one thing I'm doing here this year, differently than previous years, is as opposed to looking forward into, okay, what do I want to do in 2022? Which is all just projection. I'm kind of happy to report that it's nice to look back on 2021 and like and go through the checklist of things that did happen. Because part of the reoccurring theme that we discuss is talk versus action, how to turn these ideas that percolate in your head that frustrate you because they don't actually come into fruition. What is the mechanism? What is the means? What is the moment that it turns into something real? And how do you make that happen? Because so often everyone's like, just do this, just do that, put your mind to it, all that motivation, follow your dreams content out there. But no one identifies the precise mechanism by which you can actually make the change concretely from something existing in your head to something existing in real life. So for example, over the past year, I probably wrote down in front of me certain systems I wanted to start implementing and goals to reach. Generally, broadly speaking, this sort of sums it up. These aren't specifically wrote down, but it was generally grow a social media presence. Like every single time I say it, I'm going to catch myself. Maybe I'll practice pausing instead of saying like growing a social media presence. I think I wrote some arbitrary numbers down, 10K on Instagram, this and this and this. But a lot of that happened where over 2021, from 2020 to 2021, that stretch, I'm looking back and that happened in some form. Like there is an audience to make stuff for. There's a relationship that I have formed in some way. Not sure how to make sense of it. And the next steps for me going into 2022, we could talk about of what the next steps are for that relationship. That happened. Podcast, episode 12. That's looking back now, not looking forward, because looking forward is sort of unknown potential. None of it's real yet. It's just speculation. It's just an idea. None of it's real yet. But what is real is stuff that has already happened. And maybe what I've been doing wrong, or what a lot of people do wrong, is constantly in the new year, as the resolutions come in, say all the things they're going to do and make all these false promises to themselves that a month and a half after that New Year's energy dies down, that hasn't happened yet. And maybe it's smarter and more encouraging to look back on the things that you have done and then double down on those because you've already done them. And I've been thinking about that. Coming into 2022, it's like, look back on 2021. I said like again. Look back on 2021 and say, okay, all those things did happen. And I can talk about in detail what I did differently that I think made those things happen. And I'm happy to elaborate. But
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say is that you once told me that John Mayer came to speak to you at Berkeley. He came to speak to you. He called you up and said, I want to give you some advice.
He spoke at Berkeley. I didn't get into the clinic, but they filmed it and I watched the clips.
And I remember you said that he said the difference between doing something you say you're going to do and not doing something you say you're going to do all comes down to writing it down. He said there's something like 95% more likely to do something if you just literally take a pen and write it on a piece of paper. So which I have been doing for a very long time, but it sounds like you also just writing down your goals, literally writing them down, which sounds so silly, but taking 30 seconds to write them down can make the world of difference. So that's cool that you actually wrote down the numbers that you wanted to get. I would love for you to walk through a couple things that you set out to do that you adapted to do and actually accomplish this year.
Okay. You are mixing up several Berkeley memories that I shared with you into one, and it's beautiful. John Mayer said a few things. He talked about defining your goals and your expectations before you set out on something. That was the nugget of wisdom he dropped. Do you want to sell 1,000 copies of a record or do you want to sell 1,000,000? Because each one of those things, this was also kind of in a different time when you're dealing with major labels and how to appeal to mass audiences. And he would write these pop songs to try to get his record popular, but then he also threw in songs for him. He was talking about that balance because, striking a balance between writing a commercially successful album that appeals to 1,000,000 people might sound kind of different than, wanting to appeal to 1,000 or 5,000 people. That might be different now too, those rules and what those kind of parameters are. So that was John Mayer's point. But what I did tell you was a teacher at Berkeley cited a statistic. Oh. It's okay because it's good. Both it's all valid. But a teacher did say something that I never forgot. It was like one of my final semesters at college. And he said they did a study on the most successful people, like the Titans, the Tim Ferriss people, the billionaires. What is the one common thing habitually, one common habit that they had that they all had in common? They wrote things down incessantly, lists every single day. And I never wrote anything down up until that point. And that was one thing that was thrown at me of all the little nuggets of wisdom and here's what you should do. I just said, oh, that I can do. And I started, and I had an iPhone or something, and I used the notes and I started writing things down. And specifically what changed over the last, I'd say, year and a half or 2 years is I read a book by Scott Adams, the hypnotist comic book animator, creator of the Dilbert comic strips.
The alt-right hypnotist.
Alt-right hypnotist.
Comic
Such
book
an
animator.
interesting character. Interesting. Now it's kind of like, dude, I don't know. I'm a fan still, but he did a lot of things in the political world in terms of analysis and predictions on Trump, which was interesting. But more than that, I kind of discovered him because he was promoting his book, How to Fail at Everything and Still Win Big.
Wouldn't it be funny if, as he was doing his Trump videos on Twitter, the house in the background got like less and less nice as he lost his fortune?
Well, he could have.
He started out in this like beautiful room.
Welcome back to the what is it? The Sip? The Simultaneous Sip? That's the name of the show. Did you ever watch it on Twitter?
Yeah, no, I used to watch it all the time. He would like be in this beautiful leather chair in this like gorgeous reading room in his mansion in Texas.
By the end,
he's like in like an apartment in Los Angeles.
Yeah, he's well, it's working out great. Welcome back to the Simultaneous.
I wasn't wrong, but my life has been destroyed.
Like, I think in 2024 you might see Trump win. You might see Trump run. You might see Bush run. You might even see Bush Sr. run.
Did he say that?
Now, I know he's dead, but how do we know? His ideas just get so crazy, and then he finds a way to make it somewhat convincible. You're like, Anyway, that stuff aside, his ideas on hacking and programming your mind for success was really interesting because he spoke about things more. we've definitely spoken
We
about it
spoke
before,
about this in, like,
but he
episode
really talks
2.
about the brain as not this thing that you just have this will to control. It's more like it's this hackable piece of software that you proactively have to do things around yourself environmentally to get yourself to do things. So it's like, don't say, I'm going to work out every day. I'll just work out. He's like, no, just put your shoes on for a second. Once you put your shoes on, something happens. It's like one switch triggers another switch. You can't just start with the behavioral pattern over here. You have to set in motion things that like go way back to a system. He really talks about systems versus goals.
Right.
So I started taking that idea seriously of systems. It's like, okay, forget just some arbitrary goal, because, and ever since I've read that book, I keep hearing these ideas repeated by more and more people and articulated more. And I'm sure he had something to do with it, because his book talks about systems versus goals. So as opposed to goals, which are kind of arbitrary, you kind of don't know what you want, but you set them. What you can do on a day-to-day basis is you can't accomplish a goal every single day, because those are far off and abstract, but you can do a system. And that system is, when he got the opportunity to write for a successful blog, it was because he had just been blogging every single day for months, for years. I don't know how long it was. But then when the opportunity came about to write for a blog, he was ready, and he had the skills and the sensibilities to do it effectively, as opposed to saying, I really want to get a blog. And he just spent time trying to chase this goal of getting a blog. Instead, he just wrote every single day with no particular goal in mind, but him doing that system was a success. And I started doing things like that too. So I took a whiteboard and I wrote down several items, but in the form of systems, not goals. And one of them was make something every day. It was so general like that, but it was make stuff every day. That was like 2019 systems. This started in 2019. So I wasn't thinking to myself, I have to get to some other, from point A to point B. I was like, let me just make something. Started making a tiny piece of...
So explain that. So how do you figure out what system you want to create if you don't know where you want to end up? Like it maybe you don't say it out loud or write it down, but there is a thought of like, let's say I want 1 million followers. So what sort of system do I need? Is that how you think about it? What sort of system do I need to get to 1 million followers? And then you come up with make something every day?
So I started the systems process before I really knew how to do social media properly, or before anything was revealed to me about social media. I was doing the systems, which eventually led me to discover things about social media. But my thing in the beginning was, just do the systems first. Try it that way, because there were a lot of things that hadn't happened yet where it was like, I'm trying to think for a second. I think if I go through what I wrote down systems wise, it'll probably help.
Okay.
So I wanted to get better at playing piano, certain instruments that I wanted to brush up on, because I'm a bass player and singer, but there are other instruments I play, but I wanted to get better at. So I wrote down something like improve piano or piano and harmonica. Like I wrote a bunch of instruments down that I say I want to practice and get better at, but I never wrote it down and put it as a system. So I wrote those down. I wrote down certain pieces of software that I wanted to get better at using. And I like bundled two together, make stuff every day using this software. So Ableton Live, I use Logic for music stuff, but Ableton is another program that has been gaining in popularity and is really interesting. So I wrote that down, learn Ableton Live.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
Maybe you answer me your question where you start with just what do you have a passion or impulse to do, and if you build up enough of those things and you get better at all those things, those systems will lead to opportunities.
Yeah, it's more like identifying what you obviously enjoy and what you're good at and finding that cross section. But what we're trying to solve for a lot of people, and for myself, what I was trying to solve is application, right? How do I apply my passions and interests into concrete things? Because otherwise they just sit in your head like, man, I want to do more of this. So I did have other ones that were more goal oriented, like long form TV series, like get on long form TV, like those kinds of things were more goal oriented, but everything else was sort of informing that, like building up. You heard what I said?
Yeah.
I can't stop it every time. Now I've drawn too much attention to it. But everything I was doing was more, the systems are more like on like fitness, creative fitness and skill building. And then the long form goals are there too. So I wrote down, get on a long form TV thing. I wrote down a bunch of things. I'm trying to think that were more in the goal category, but I wrote down some contacts to stay in touch with. I wrote down instruments I want to get better at, software I want to get better at. And then I wrote down like under content. AJ Comedy, or I wrote comedy, impressions daily, post impressions daily, more comedy content, one high-res video a week, those kinds of things. But those are all systematic.
So this actually goes to a difference between you and me, also something I'm working on, where my question already was goal-oriented and results-oriented, where another way to say what I just said before is think about what in a perfect world, if you had $1 billion, what would you like to do every day with your time? Like what, not where you want to get, but what do you want to do consistently? So like, you're like, I want to make comedy consistently, make people laugh. So turn that into a system. I want to do impressions and make people laugh. Turn that into a system, not followers, money, contracts, etc.
Even that question,
but
if I had $1 billion,
itself,
what's implied
itself,
in that,
right.
the implication there is
that there is
I'm trying to get to this place where I don't have to work
right.
and do anything.
Right.
But for me, I really like the process. I like the work. And what I want to do is make money so I can do the work.
Right.
Not do the work so I can get the money.
So that's how you choose a system. What sort of work do you want to be doing? And how do you get better at that? And then the better you get at that, when the opportunities arise, you'll be able to capitalize.
We just come from such a culture of success, results-oriented things where you're pressured to do something you don't like for the results, for the financial stability. And in creative endeavors, no, like you want to write and you want to do things. So you have. I started looking at it that way for a long time. Even before I started the systems, I looked at pursuits in the music industry as, well, I love making the music. So how can I make money to support that? Not how can I do the music so I can make the money? Obviously, the money's super important, but mainly as a means to sustain a lifestyle and a creative daily regimen so that I could make the music, because that's what's fulfilling.
Right.
The money helps to allow for that.
Okay.
And we come from a background where maybe the work isn't necessarily what fulfills you, but the results can allow you to do things that fulfill you.
Great.
So
that
mindset,
now
I shifted.
That's clear. Okay.
So I shifted that mindset well before I started implementing these systems. So I already had, I knew what I wanted to. I just want to make music. But that always felt for years irresponsible. You can't just like make random music every day with no goal. I had this hat on for years of, no, focus on goals, on getting to this point, making sure you're focused and not distracting yourself with practicing the piano.
Your feelings.
But then all of a sudden you begin practicing instruments, which inspires you to make this, which then you find yourself at an opportunity and someone says, hey, by the way, I have this gig, but they also need you to play piano. Are you able to do that? And you're like, yeah. These weird things start to happen when you're just putting in the effort on a regular basis. You're just becoming resilient and strong and in shape creatively to take on all the opportunities that come about by, the efforts that you're putting in. It's a strange thing. I can't explain it, but I'm not saying opportunities just come out of thin air, but at a certain point, you're doing these things so that when they do come, because you have to sort of pursue those things too. Yeah. But once I started, and because of social media, once I started able to express my efforts and not just in some sort of hobbyist way where I'm like a regimented practice where nobody sees that and can be impacted by it. I also wrote down on this thing, camera and shooting. I wrote like shooting, lighting. Once it was there in front of me on a whiteboard every day, one day I went on Amazon and I ordered an cheap LED light and a cheap GoPro that I had from like ages ago that never hooked up. So I just started going through this painful process because I wrote it down. It said shooting, lighting. Okay. And then one random day, as opposed to all the other random days before that, I put up this GoPro and it sucked. And I shot myself. and I shot myself doing something, looping some music thing in those early, like 2019.
Yeah,
and I started recording myself making a video.
Yeah.
And all the lighting is terrible. And I knew it was, but I couldn't identify why it was bad. But I was like, this works. It's something. And I put it on Instagram. And when I say I put it on Instagram, underneath the shooting and lighting was post to social media, like daily or whatever it was, 3 times a week, whatever I wrote down, post social media. These were like the initial stages. The next year, as things started happening, I started writing numbers down, like try to get to 10 to, grow by this amount. But I wasn't really focused on those numbers. I was just focused on the main thing was consistency. Mm-hmm. And then the comedy stuff started happening because TikTok sort of came into the fold. It was it was originally just Instagram, no YouTube, no TikTok. TikTok wasn't really around yet, or I wasn't plugged into it. But then I started doing just like that crappy beginning stuff. You start on first base and you don't know what you're doing. So you just do it uncomfortably. Right. Then the comedy stuff started happening where TikTok, I'm like, well, TikTok's a new one. Let me just throw one thing up a day. I'll do an impression, and then stumbled onto the Gary Vee impression, leaned into that super hard.
And it was easy because none of your friends were on TikTok. No one was seeing you besides people on TikTok.
I didn't care about that per se, but the point was that all of a sudden, by the time the Gary Vee thing went, my first like viral video, I guess I could say, I had like done all of this stuff up until then, and people came back to the profile, and there was like all of this kind of stuff, like this foundation, and also these best practices of mine that it wasn't so hard to continue. I think if I posted that and it just went viral, I would have been like, I don't know what to do here. Like I've never made another video. That just happened to go. And a lot of people kind of burn out because they haven't built up the fitness.
Yeah, it's actually, whenever I see like an awesome video and it has like 500,000 likes, I'm like, oh, who is this person? And that's the only video they have with 500,000 likes. I'm always like, oh, that's so interesting. I wonder where you go from there.
Right.
And inevitably they don't go anywhere.
There was a scary moment. I was
sense.
like, what do I went over like over the course of a week and after posting for like a year with very little anything. And I would try to boost a post, pay $50 to see what would happen then. I had no idea. And it was just more of a patience game where over the course of a weekend, I went from a few hundred followers on Instagram to like 2,000. And like it plateaued off there for a while. But I was like, there's 2,000 people in here on this page? And then I was like, whoa, what happened? But it wasn't like overnight. It was that whole buildup.
Right.
I hope that answered the question thoroughly. For anyone wondering out there, what made the difference? It was those. It wasn't that I posted every day. It was. But before I did that, what nobody talks about is what to do to get to the thing.
Right.
What to do to get to these things that you need to do. Yeah. Yes, you need to post consistently.
Right.
But beneath that, how do you get yourself to build up a new habit of posting consistently?
Right.
That's the real,
right. It's very different than the message I'm used to seeing from these kind of motivational speakers of like sort of like manifesting what you want in the world, setting goals, saying it out loud and going straight towards that goal. This is much more like it's almost like spiritual. It's more like don't go outward, go inward. And the deeper and the more deeply you go inward, the more things will start coming around you. Almost
what I'm saying is go inward.
Yeah, like go inward towards the process, get better, get deeper, and then things will start coming towards you instead of going towards the thing that you want.
Yes, there's a spiritual component to it for sure, but
that's how I would think about it.
I look at it more as just hyper practical. Like, don't tell me mindset. Don't tell me manifest. Yes, those things help. And even affirmations help. I was doing those too. Admittedly, like I repeat certain things to myself on a daily basis that sort of help prime the focus and everything. But tell me exactly what to do. In other words, yes, I want to get in shape. You don't manifest getting in shape by thinking about it. Teach me how to do the push-up. Just one push-up first, then 2, then 10. Like there is a process before the process that most people aren't conscious of, because then you hear all this motivational, like, mumble jumble, and you sit there and you're like, okay,
well,
what do I do again?
And going back to last week, that's Tim Dillon's problem with like, he's like hustle,
Does
work.
That need to be charged, by the way?
Oh, let me double check.
Double check. Quick ad break as Michael checks the camera. Remember, we're talking about creative pursuits on this special New Year's episode, January 2022 coming up, wrapping up 2021. Is it in? Is it charging? Are we good? Because we don't want a dead camera. We're dropping nuggets here of wisdom. Yes. Doesn't say should be good. Michael's returning to the studio and he's back. Welcome back to Buckle Up.
Thank you, BetterHelp.com.
Okay, BetterHelp.com. Appreciate it.
When you hear hustle, work, it's like, how do I work? What do I do? And so Scott Adams comes with the question of you set up these systems, you get better at what you want to do, and then when the opportunity comes, you'll be ready.
Ooh, that's a bingo. That's Christoph Waltz in Inglourious Basterds. Ooh, that's a bingo. Is that not the game? He answered that question that nobody else had answered. Put in a work. Yeah, I get it. But that's
how do you work?
That's the Tindilling. What do I do? Yeah. I get it. That's the idea. I always was like, I'm ready to work. I'm not complaining about what work it takes. But what do I do? And basically Scott Adams said, write it down in front of you and treat it as a system, not as a goal. And of all the things I happen to stumble across, that one stuck, and that one I can only recommend because it worked for me.
Right.
In terms of changing output, changing how I applied my ambitions, treating things like a system. And then I have all this, like these pieces of music that I haven't done anything yet, but they've taught me how to use the software that I wanted to use. It sort of solved all these multifaceted problems by just doing it. Then I made content doing it. And therefore, it wasn't this overwhelming, it wasn't like this it looked at it more like a skill stack where everything was sort of helping everything at once, as opposed to if you told me, well, you have to record music every day to get to your goal, and then you have to make content, and then you have to do, and you hear all that, and you're like, I can't do all those things. No. The real answer is write down the things you want to do as a system, and then see what happens as it sits there right in front of you. You'll start on one, and then while you're recording in Ableton Live, learning that software, because you're making stuff every day, you pick up a harmonica and record that because you wanted to do that, and then you book your piano lesson after that with this guy who's teaching you a few things. And then somebody asks you to play on this track and you can actually play the piano part. So you're expanding on that. And then you've built up a bunch of instrumentals that you pitch to a producer who's got a show that he's working on because you wanted to work on a show. So things just start to...
So help me out, because I'm still a little bit confused about how to start. Maybe it's because I'm so results-oriented. If I wanted to make my own system for myself for 2023, 22, where would I start?
Are you repping for the audience, or are you asking from your genuine self?
I really am serious, because I understand the word you're saying, but then I'm trying to imagine you making a system, and I still don't know exactly what it means to take your goals and turn them into a system.
It's pretty simple. Listen.
So yeah.
Inspiration, motivation, deviation,
condensation,
reverberation, remediation, recovery, motivation.
And love.
With those things combined, you're guaranteed for success. You can't go wrong. So you're saying what? What should you do?
So let's.
You want me to tell you what you should do?
Yeah,
that's what you want.
Yeah. Let's say. Let's.
What do you like to do?
Okay.
Walk
me through
I
it.
know this.
I like to write
and
television
create
pilots.
stories.
Yeah.
You like to write TV pilots.
TV pilots. I really enjoy doing that. Like original, out there ideas, not based on something else. Necessarily.
Do you write TV pilot ideas every day for a fixed amount of time?
No. Do I come up, generate new ideas? No, I don't.
Do you go to the lab with an empty pen and paper, computer, whatever it may be, and write? So I have one thing to say to you. Stop lying to yourself.
No, do I write? Yes, I do write. Do I come up with new ideas every day?
Not necessarily. I'm just saying, do you put pen to paper every day?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
How long?
How long do I
write for?
Literally,
is it a fixed amount of time that you're doing it?
I'd say at least on a great day, 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
On a bad day, an hour and a half.
Right, but you're doing this on a daily, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Not Sunday,
I'm
Saturday.
sitting at my desk in front of my laptop. Like, I mean, I'm trying to punch the keys, but I'm sitting in front of an open script or like an open notepad.
And you're writing dialogue. You're writing what?
Some days it's thinking about the world and the characters and like trying to really hone in on what story I'm trying to tell and what the mechanics are, like what is the thing.
Yeah.
Some days it's literally writing scenes and dialogue and yeah.
Okay, so that system's pretty good. That's already an effective system.
Okay.
So don't look at each day as like, well, nothing happened with this yet. I think you got to get that out of your head. If you wrote something that day, that's like a success. That's like a workout. Like,
so that would be my
you're in better shape.
TV pilot writing system. Sit down every day and write.
But it's only TV pilots is what you want to be doing?
Well, I'm just giving an example. That's one goal.
So
that's not a goal. That's just something I like to do.
Yeah, something you do on a daily basis. That's good. What? Any other things creatively?
I like doing this. I like sitting. I like editing the reels.
Right. We're doing that daily. We kind of are. So that's good. And then there's the element you were saying of your own content. A couple funny videos. You said you want to be doing that every day.
Right.
So making it, which is exercising your
like my
muscle.
performance muscle.
You're writing little sketch, which probably can inform the writing in the beginning.
It's taking little ideas I would have in the shower or something and actually cementing them in something concrete. Where other people could see them instead of just being forgotten.
Right. And I guess the only thing missing from the equation is, with the exception of posting on your own TikTok, is how to get the writing expressed in some kind of way that's not just sitting on a computer, getting no exposure to anything.
Right.
In other words, what if you, on Twitter or whatever, there's got to be an app, or there's a social media app that's just for writing, right? You might know about it. Isn't there?
Just to connect with other writers?
No, not like to connect with writers, so that people can consume your content in a way where they're like, I love this little story. I love this little thing. That was cool.
There are like self-publishing
Right.
platforms.
What's like the written form TikTok? Is there one where people can react, engage with
Twitter.
Stuff? Yeah, Twitter.
Twitter, yeah. Oh, was that a setup?
No,
Say Twitter?
it's Twitter.
Yeah.
It is Twitter, but if that's something you're interested in getting light onto your work,
It's hard.
like
so,
getting
I mean,
exposure
yeah.
for your work to people to react to make impact on
I've
somebody.
done it on Facebook and I've done it on Instagram, and people generally, it's very, very difficult to get a large amount of people to read more than a paragraph or
Right.
two anywhere. Like you can't really put up a 2-page story or a 5-page story anywhere.
Unless it's riveting, and then they have to go read the whole thing.
Even so, I mean, I suppose if you have like a real Grand Slam, right? Like, but then you have a Grand Slam and whatever. But even so, I mean, I think it's really difficult to get anyone. I mean, on Instagram, I tried different things with like cartoons and like the slides and stuff, just a few sentences on each page. But
You mean for those biblical convos?
yeah, those and a couple people read them, but most people don't want to read text on these platforms. They want
Yeah,
to
but
be
how
looking
long
at
did
videos
you
and
do it
pictures.
for a minute and then
Did
stop?
it for like a year. Did it for a whole year.
Right.
And no, people read it, but it's just not the right medium for the written.
That could be, but you also stopped before you discovered what the right medium was, didn't you? Didn't you? You did biblical convos and then stopped. I'm just asking.
I did a full cycle for the year, but yeah, and then I stopped.
And then you stopped.
But I've also written, long form, sort of a collection of short stories that also for what it was, it did very, very well. But
What was that?
like Red Zin, the collection of short stories. I mean, you're just not going to get a ton of people to read things online. It's like that's pretty well understood.
So if I was getting creative,
long
I don't
form
have the
online,
answers, but
yeah.
the
Yeah, I don't even
systems
know how
are.
we got into that.
No, you're asking what you should do to what exactly?
Well, it would be more producing. For
This
what we're talking
stuff.
about, it'd be more producing the films or the pilots, or
Right.
putting it onto camera.
Putting it onto-
less than the.
But that's what it's meant for.
Yeah. I have shorts also that are just like a page long.
Right.
That I've thought about putting on Facebook also, or putting out as like a little book of mine.
Yeah. Then the question is,
that's
are you aspiring, or is your main, I guess goal is the right word, but what do you see yourself as, a filmmaker or a screenwriter? Because
Yeah.
then you're like looking at this as a seed of something, but the system continues to say, now I want to shoot one of my stories a month and turn it into something that people can watch and consume visually.
Yeah.
Which would mean either I get the camera and I get some student film people to partner up and shoot this one scene.
Yeah.
And then I post that scene. And then you're treating yourself more as a general creator of media.
That's good.
So that you can express your ideas. And at first it looks a little raw, and then it gets a little better. Before you know it, you have these tiny little bits of scenes that people are consuming in 1 to 2 minute pieces.
So to bring it back, how would I systemize that?
Well, the hard thing about film itself is it requires a lot of
can't just do it on your
requires
own
a
every
team.
day, yeah.
But you could read it and like visualizers and put little scenes together with visual and text, so that somebody can watch on Instagram and like.
So
scene one.
What would I write on the whiteboard? I'm trying to get real specific. What would I write on the whiteboard?
You'd say like write every day. You probably would say something like, to the effect, you'd write your general goals, TV pilot, this and this. You'd write the networks you want to like connect with, AMC, this and that, whatever it may be, Hulu, and maybe some contacts you have under there that just kind of stare at you. So that when you have an idea and you're like, hey, have this, you write something, you think of this person, there's a connection that can kind of form as you see the different people.
Okay.
Your best for certain drama ideas, maybe it's Hulu and this person. For another type of vibe, it's this person that you might know. And then maybe it's your Twitter game. I would say it's tweeting. You're good at the captions on our stuff. Yeah. You have a natural flavor and style that I say comes through best. It's hard to tell people what to do specifically at this level.
Yeah.
Because if you're that clueless, you're fucked. No, I would say when I look at some of the stuff you put out, to turn a scene into some movie is a big ask. But if you were interested in doing that, get a camera, shoot one scene, or shoot, learn how to make content that supports the work, that features it in some way. Twitter's a good way to introduce people to your mind, to your brain if you tweeted daily to build up a Twitter following. Hey guys, just published this article in, Excuses Daily, this magazine. I don't know what you.
Excuses magazine.
That's a great idea.
That is a good idea.
Excuse all the reasons you're not doing something.
Just
what I mean is,
different
so
people with great excuses.
What was easy with comedy and content was it's all one and the same. To me, the video I make on TikTok for a funny bit is the art. I don't have to make a video that supports the art, so that helps. Yeah. So what medium there are like platforms now that can bring yourself to an audience and connect to people if that's what you want to do. So Twitter for you, because you're writing and you could write funny ideas and things. Like when I follow certain people who tweet, I always can see their personality in it. I'm not good at it, but Tim Dillon is good at it. I have a lot of Twitter accounts. And you have a lot of Twitter people you follow pretty adamantly, right?
Well, the thing is, I haven't been on Twitter in 6 years.
Right.
Since 2016. I
think it's time.
I got to get back on
treating
it.
me like Gary Vee himself.
I have a Twitter account called Blockbuster Originals,
right,
which is like if Blockbuster started their own streaming service.
Right.
And just with awful ideas for original original content.
Right.
Just outdated, hacky, awful TV shows. So I started, I do a couple, and then I sort of give up.
But that's the thing. Everything, the common thread with all of this is you kind of know. It's just that if Biblical Convos was still going strong, it would probably be stronger, better, and a little more adept to what's going on. And maybe you would have said, I started Instagram, but then this other thing came up that was a lot better for what I was doing, but I was doing it, so it was an easy transition. Now you'd feel like I have to start Biblical Convos up again. The consistency stopped, so you didn't find your way.
Yeah, Biblical Convos was a weekly project based on the Bible portion of that week. It was kind of like a funny, weird take on whatever the story was happening.
Right.
So, and then I would put that up on Instagram. It was a conversation between two characters. I put that up on Instagram. It was for like a group of like 20 people who enjoyed it. It ended up being.
Now, I remember I didn't always get through a few of them because some of it was a little bit graphics dense and I couldn't figure out what I was reading. But I could have seen that, eventually getting to a place where you hired or hooked up with an animator guy who really liked it, put audio to it, and tiny little, and it became this. You know what Freedom Tunes is?
No.
It's a guy who does all the intellectual dark web characters, and he voices all the characters, and it's animated. So there's like a Jordan Peterson, but it's like, come on, man. And he does all the bits. And it's like Ben Shapiro was like that, man. He's like a cartoon. And he's built up this big YouTube following.
Yeah.
Biblical Convos naturally to me translates to that, where it's first, if you look at anybody's Instagram with a ton of followers, you go to the first post, it's comparable to Biblical Convos, to your initial efforts, that first year or two, or 10 or 20. The first year or two, let's say, it's baby stages, fetal stages. It's not figured out yet what it is. But if you plow through with the consistency, you may be in a spot. Now, I'm not trying to make you feel regretful, but you certainly would be in a better position to learn about what it is and what tools better serve the content. Because the content's interesting, and you were spoofing the Bible.
Yeah.
You're risking your life.
No, I felt it was a lot of work, and I also didn't. I liked like 10% of them. I really liked 10% of them. The rest of them felt a little bit forced, and I was just kind of like, this isn't. I was like, I committed to a year. I did a year.
Yeah.
But I'm not even enjoying this so much.
The dip got you.
It was the dip, and I didn't see the other side of it. Right. I was like, maybe I could get really, really good at this. But I don't. But even if I did, I don't necessarily see because some of them I thought were really good, and even those didn't get a lot of eyeballs. So it was like, I'm happy I made those, but even if I get really good at this, I'm not exactly sure where it's heading. And I'd rather just make them as they come to me instead of pushing through that dip.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, again, I'm not a writer, so I don't know what the SoundCloud, Spotify, Instagram video, YouTube version of writing is. Yeah. If there is a place, but maybe
I think Twitter.
Twitter for sure. Yeah. But let's say you started posting on a random thing every day, or like maybe complete ideas to fruition, like a whole scene every week to finish a whole scene. Maybe some app gets developed next year that we haven't heard of yet that's for writers, and you're already primed to do it because you have tons of written content that could go to it. Right. I don't know, but I would just say above all else is consistency, because with consistency, it all gets better, and then your opportunities find their way.
Yeah.
So
I think of someone like John. You ever see How To with John Wilson?
No.
Oh, it's awesome. It's on HBO. It's these video essays where a guy basically walks around the city
Oh, yeah,
and just
you
takes
spoke about
little
this.
kind of snapshots. Oh yeah, our friend is involved with someone who works on it now. Involved. She's like working with him. Well, anyway, no, like a guy. I feel like a project like that comes out of systems thinking, where it's sort of he just does what seems right to him, and then builds it, and then kind of sees where it takes him.
And he didn't say, "Oh, I'm going to get this on Hulu or wherever
Or
I'm
like
going to get it
HBO,
distributed."
yeah.
I'm going to make something.
Right.
That's what I want to do
Right.
in and of itself. I'm going to make something.
Right. So I think if I committed to making some 30-second video for TikTok every day, you can get to a place like that where you land on something that feels right.
And then it gets more macro. Like I want to tell this story,
Right.
and I want to tell it in 3 pages, or I want to tell it in a screenplay, or in whatever form. But the point is, if you're writing every single day, it's very analogous to fitness. Any physical, and when you're in shape and you work out every day, all the different physical endeavors you could be on, it will be easier to do. You'll climb this mountain, you'll go on this hike, you'll ride this bike, you'll swim across this lake. The point is, you're working out every day. You're not saying, I want to swim across that lake and on that lake only. No, you're working out every day so that when these different resistance, when these different things of resistance come against you, you're able to tackle them.
Right.
Or these different endeavors that require you to be in shape creatively. That's the answer. That's the best answer.
So
I
it would
could
be
give
like, I want to be creative. So the same way I'm going to show up to the gym every day, I'm going to show up to my desk every day. I'm good. The same way I do 10 push-ups a day, I'm going to like write 2 scenes every day. And
There's a great podcast with Seinfeld on the Tim Ferriss show. Did you listen to that one? Jerry Seinfeld on Tim Ferriss?
Seinfeld
is great.
I'm really so cynical. He's great, and I bought his book right afterwards. Something just rubbed me the wrong way about that dude.
About the book? Or
about Seinfeld.
Why? Everybody, you don't trust a single
you
human
told
being.
me to listen to it. No, I trust him. I totally trust him. No, I don't think there's anything devious.
I told you
at
to
all
listen to
about
that
him.
podcast.
Yeah, no, and I listened. I was in traffic on the way to the city, and I listened. And then I bought the book afterwards. Is This Something by Jerry Seinfeld?
I bought that too.
By Jerome Seinfeld. It bothers me when people have such little sympathy or empathy for people who can't get it together. And maybe I'm guilty of that also. But he has, first of all, he's way older than I thought. I think is he 60? Yeah. 60. He has a little bit of that attitude of just like, why don't you just do it? Why don't you just get it together? Which I think is right. But he also came up in a time where it was easier. It seems like, I'm not comparing myself to Seinfeld. I'm just gonna say it. Yeah, I'm gonna sound like an ass, but I'm just gonna say it. He came up in a time where if you were a really talented comedian and you did enough stand up, you got a show on a major network. That was just the environment. And he sort of acts like everyone now should also be able to have that sort of success if they just sort of do the things you're supposed to do. And it bothers me a little bit.
Okay.
Now you go.
I'm gonna say a few things.
Okay.
One of them is gonna
his attitude.
One of them is gonna articulate what you're feeling about him. I think even better
yeah.
than you just did.
Okay.
And I actually think it's by saying the exact opposite of what you just said.
I'm excited to hear.
Okay? Here's why you're wrong, but you actually feel this way. Seinfeld came up in a time where you had to be green lit. It was actually much, much harder as a talented comic to make it because it relied so much on parties that be. Mm-hmm. Somebody had to discover you. The timing had to be right. So many shows got shelved. A lot of talented comics didn't see the light of day. They had no means to get an audience to see them or hear them unless they got on some major show that had that funding, distribution, and attention to get people. Mm-hmm. The couple of people that we see that made it, and the Seinfelds and Everybody Loves Raymond, there's like probably hundreds of comics behind them that never, ever, ever saw the light of day in terms of a mass audience. They work probably working comics. There's tons of people talented, and I'm sure Jerry would probably attest to that. Yeah, unfortunately, he never broke. Such a great comic, such a great talent. Now, he was one of those lucky people that, in a sense, got his shot and, is what he is. But I think what bothers you about Seinfeld, probably more, I don't know if you agree with what I just said, because back in his day, there was no social media. There was no any way to get an audience but those mechanisms.
I think I can finish that thought, but I want to hear you say it.
I'm going to say what you might not like, what you might not, I don't want to be presumptuous, but what might bother you about Seinfeld, and what bothered me a little bit in that interview, was his attitude about who can make it and who cannot is very binary. He's the type of guy who, ironically, it came across that he would say to somebody, it's not for you. You know what? No, you're just not that funny. I'm sorry. Some people have it, some people don't. If you have it and you go for it, you're in for a hard ride. But it's just for some people and it's not for other people. Sorry. If you're funny, you're funny. If you're not funny, you're not funny. And these people who want to get into comedy, I say, don't do it. I get to do it. You don't get to do it. Bill Maher has the same attitude. Fame is not for everybody. It's for me and it's for my people. Stop trying to be. So he shits on like TikTokers and Gen Z, Bill Maher, that is, who's sort of a colleague a little bit in that same generational comic as Seinfeld. And they sort of look with disdain on the new media and entertainment. These people don't deserve it. We're the funny ones, or the protectors of the gate. And for these people who think they're funny, they're not funny. You know, that attitude, which is ironic because he tells stories of Mitzi at the...
It was a great story.
At the Comedy Store, who said, I'm going to be one of these people that stomps in you. Not enough people say no to you, Jerry. I'm going to be one of those people. So you would think he would empathize with people who are getting discouraged. At the same time, he's not wrong. You know, there are people who are funny. All these and if Seinfeld were to tell you an aspiring comic they're not funny, and that person set out to prove Seinfeld wrong, great. Seinfeld doesn't care at the end if they win. Yeah, I don't think that's the attitude. But this binary attitude, I would prefer somebody say. What I would agree with more is give it a shot, see where you're at. I don't know. I don't decide. I know what I think is funny, but I'm not setting some sort of rule that it's certainly not for everybody. That's true as a general statement. But I can't make that determination. And he probably would agree with that too. But he comes off sometimes as saying, nah, it's such a grueling, hard. Anybody who would want to get into this, you really have to love it. He didn't say anything I disagreed with really overtly. But more the vibe that you're describing is this binary attitude of, it's for me, honey, not for you.
Totally. I hate that. I hate that, like, right, you're either funny and you're not. I'm one of the lucky ones. And then not quite acknowledging how lucky he is. So it's what you said, it's that binary, plus mixed with, you're right. I said it wrong. There's a ton of gatekeepers, and it's almost impossible to make it. He happened to get lucky enough to do it, and he attributes a lot of that to his own work ethic and his own talent and his own just himself. Where the truth is, he actually got extremely lucky, and it feels like in the 80s and 90s. Just as a straight white guy, there were more opportunities for straight white guys like him to get lucky than there are now. Where
I don't really buy that. Is Chris Rock more lucky or less lucky, or people who weren't straight white guys who made it in that era?
I think Chris Rock,
or all the African American sitcoms of the 90s that were huge.
I'd say if you were an African American who got a sitcom in the 90s, you were, let's say, 1,000 lucky, whereas if you're a white guy, you were like 100 lucky. Like, you had to be extremely lucky and extremely talented to be Chris Rock. You just had to be pretty lucky and pretty talented to be Jerry Seinfeld. Not to be Jerry Seinfeld, but to get a show on ABC.
My limited experience so far, the hardest working guy in the room wins. Doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't matter. Explain why Jerry. When did Seinfeld stop airing?
I want to say 2000.
And why didn't he disappear 21 years ago? Why is he still as culturally relevant as ever?
I'm not saying he's not talented and he doesn't work hard. It would just be nice for him to also say, and I got extremely lucky, and honestly, I have no idea how it happened.
Several times on the podcast, he acknowledges the success of
once.
He acknowledges the success of Seinfeld is entirely a mystery to him. Why people would ever like the show? Jason Alexander... Actual name Jay Greenspan, by the way. Yeah. Spoke at BU when I was in Boston at the time in school, and I saw him speak. But he said when they were discussing the show in the first season, he'd say, like, Jerry, what do you think? You think this is He's not George in real life. He's not like, Jerry, look at me. He was like, Jerry, what do you think? Do you think this is going to work? Or Jerry said to him, do you think this is going to work? He's like, Jerry, I love it, but who's going to get this? Because it's such inside baseball, like Jewish dynamics, humor. This isn't going to have mass appeal. We'll have fun making it, whatever. So yes, he got lucky in a sense, and not just in a sense. The show, he acknowledges that, but he's a hard-working, serious comic and doesn't really rest on his laurels. He made Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, which I found was to me, I connected with more as a show than even
I
Seinfeld.
hate it.
I love it.
It's
I love it.
if you don't,
but it's that vibe
for some. It's the vibe. It's the only thing. The whole thing is the vibe.
Yeah. But he does have this. That's what Bill Burr
it.
said to him. He's like, people think you're like this clean comic, dude. You have this disdain for humanity. Ooh, you are dark. This guy is dark. And there's that arrogant sort of like,
It's I don't know what it is
but I described it to you. I described how you feel about him better than you did.
No, you did, and you get that same feeling sometimes when you're in like someone has a really nice house. And you're there in the summer, and they just sort of sit back and like it's this vibe of like I'm one of the fortunate few who got smiles upon, and like instead of taking that and becoming like really humble and like giving back to be like I don't deserve any of this, I'm just like lucky to be here. It's this like I'm gonna put up gates so the unlucky don't touch me. Like if you get touched by the unlucky ones, then you turn unlucky.
And he gives you that vibe.
Oh, so much of like I don't want to be around these comics who think they're funny and they're not. Like
there's something about his confidence and lack of there's something about his sense of like hyper self-awareness that I respect and I connect with. In other words,
it's honest.
It's honest. Yeah. So I can't fault him for that because he's not being snooty.
Yeah.
He's just like I was once talking to John Stossel, the journalist John Stossel. Remember he came as a surprise for like my birthday thing?
Disgraced journalist John Stossel?
No. He said to me, he's in the building on the west side, and Seinfeld's apartment was like in the same building we were in.
Yeah.
John Stossel tells me, I was in Jerry's apartment for like this party for the building, and we all walked in. I started talking to Jerry. You're gonna like this, but you'll get it. And John Stossel tells me, about a couple sentences into the conversation, I was like, anyway, and Seinfeld goes, wait. We don't need any more friends. What are we doing? And just calls out the small talk. And he's Seinfeld, so of course Stossel probably laughed it off. But he's like, we don't need to do this, right? We have enough friends. Okay, it's good to see you.
Right. So that's hilarious hearing it from me.
Yeah.
What a dick. What a dick to say that to another human being.
Right.
Like that's the thing that...
maybe he's just Seinfelding it and calling out the obvious thing that they're both thinking.
Maybe,
like, is he making a joke or is he being insulting? And it's a fine line. But like, if Tim said that, you'd be like, I love it.
If it was funny,
But I think in the moment he's like, what are we doing? We're two guys in our 60s trying to make friends. There's a funniness to it.
There's a funniness at
Stossel's expense.
Secondhand, yeah.
But Stossel's a successful guy. Jerry's a successful guy. He's like, we don't need to do this.
Yeah. No, it's not so. It's funny because Tim Dillon, I think, has a love for humanity, and it's a joke. If it's not a joke, it's really
and the opposite is
it's
Jerry is all wholesome and whatever, but he's disdain for you. It's like what Bill Burr said.
It's a great
You're so
call.
dark. This guy's dark.
Yeah,
dude. I hear what it rubs you the wrong way.
Yeah.
There's something.
It's
about
not just him. It's people like him.
Right, but he might have a disdain for humanity. He has such a love for comics and comedy. That it offsets that. The art, he's such an artist to me. And he loves it so much. He loves comedians. He loves jokes. He loves the process. The reason I brought him up was he has a private studio where he goes every single day and just writes. And he spoke about it on the podcast with Tim Ferriss, Seinfeld's process of this grueling, painful endeavor. And he lives to make other people laugh. So I think he expels all his positive energy out on the audience. And then... who knows? I don't want to get into his head.
Here's my
but
theory.
I respect him as an artist. You have to.
I don't know. I have trouble believing that Jerry Seinfeld, who I know he's a dear friend, Jerome. I love Curb and Seinfeld. Just disclaimer. I have trouble believing when he says, "I love making people laugh." I think he loves writing jokes, and he loves. Hearing a room full of laugh. I don't buy that he wants to bring joy to people. I don't buy that.
I know what you mean.
Do you?
No, because a journalist asked him in a interview about the process. He was doing a tour, and he's like, does it feel powerful to have the room around your finger? He goes, oh,
yeah. Yeah.
Nothing like it.
And he loves constructing a very finely tuned joke and controlling the room. Whereas...
But it's win-win. All entertainers do it selfishly in some way.
Sure.
He's just honest.
But that goes into the basket of stuff that bothers me as a human being. I find him hilarious. I think he's Jerry Seinfeld. He's great. But I don't want to watch comedians in cars getting coffee and just watch him sit. I forgot who said this, but he's sitting in restaurants he could buy on the spot if he wanted to. And there's something very humorless about that. There's something not funny about him talking about the ketchup sitting in a restaurant he could buy if he wanted to.
This podcast is going to turn into Michael destroying icons of American entertainment, cinema, music. You hate Bob Dylan. You hate Jerry Seinfeld. Who's next?
A friend of mine called me this
Denzel?
weekend. He said I'm too cynical and too skeptical, and I need to do ketamine therapy.
Okay. You hate Bob Dylan, boomer bitch.
MDMA therapy.
Hated him. You hate Jerry Seinfeld now.
Jerry
But this whole
Seinfeld.
I think you tend to categorize people into these boxes of pedestaled, successful people who just have no problems and just exist on this other frequency. And then these other people, and then and then where you are or whatever, you always kind of box these people in. Jerry can just do whatever he wants. Jerry's this demigod and he knows it and can just buy the restaurant. Technically, maybe, but I can't get down with that perception of the made it's and the not made it's. It's all kind of a spectrum, and it's a matter of degree of different things. I
wouldn't say it's a made it, not made it thing, but if he's
he's entitled to live like a human and go into a coffee shop and talk about ordinary things.
I'm sure he doesn't sit there thinking to him. I mean, I don't know. I think maybe he does think to himself once in a while. I could buy this if I wanted to. But
remember his episode with Barack Obama? But Barack Obama's like to Jerry Seinfeld in the back of the car. Okay, they're having this conversation, and he's all about kind of the truth in comedy and the truth in just figuring out what is actually real in the moment. He's always on the quest for that. Just that's what he likes to do. He said to Obama, he's like, boxers or briefs in the morning? Take me through the president's day. And he's like, I do briefs. I've always liked briefs.
Is that right?
I don't remember what Barack Obama said, but he was like, shocking. Interesting. I wouldn't have thought briefs for the president. It was just like, and then they're in the back of the car, and he's like,
it's funny hearing you do it.
But he's like, so what do you miss about not being? He's like, the truth is, Jerry, I miss the anonymity. Not being famous has its perks. And Jerry goes, no, it doesn't. He's like, you prefer this? He goes, and he points to the limo he's sitting in with Barack Obama. He goes, acknowledging all of it, the success and the struggle and the this and that. He's very self-aware of it. You don't get the sense that we spent too much time on Seinfeld. I don't even know if I'm defending him to the core, but what I don't get is that there's anything he's not projecting right out to you. It's all very much on its sleeve.
Yes, and maybe my problem is just I just don't find it so funny.
Right. His opening of his special, 23 hours a day or something like that. I forgot what it was called. It was at the Beacon Theater. He goes, I don't have to be here. You decided to come here. I don't have to be here, but I decided to spend this hour with you. And it's this condescending, like, I don't have to be here. But the refreshing honesty of it all, I think people do find very funny.
It doesn't bother you that he's a satanic pedophile?
We'll end it there.
No, can we transition just one thing? He interviewed Sebastian Maniscalco
on Comedians in Cars.
Yeah, and I recently watched it, and I meant to ask you, can you do Sebastian Maniscalco saying booster?
Booster shot?
That's just saying the word booster.
Sebastian Maniscalco taking a booster. Booster? Why?
I just want to hear the word. I want to hear him say it, but you're the closest I can get.
What are you doing with the booster? Booster! Who's getting that? I don't have a perfect Maniscalco, but a little bit.
That was all right. That's good.
I'm trying to think. He used to be like, Dad, I was walking down to the protest. Who's got the signs? Who's doing? Have you ever seen that? He's like buddies with Seinfeld now. What a dream. But that's him saying booster. I don't know.
All right.
That was a strange request. Booster?
there it is. That's what I wanted.
Booster? I got
That's the one I wanted.
You're taking one shot in the arm, shot in the other arm. How many shots? Now we're wearing the mask. That. I had a good impression, but a friend of mine, Nikki Smiggs, has the best one. So once somebody cracks it, the best one.
I just imagine him reading like an article about boosters, and his only response is just one word: booster. 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 He just says it over and over. Booster.
Yeah.
All
You
right.
like Sebastian, or you're going to take him down too? Come on. He's
No,
a
I
sweet-
like him. No, so he, I don't know, like, what's the difference between him and Seinfeld? Why do I like him, and why do I get rubbed the wrong way with Seinfeld? I wonder. This is what we're trying to figure out.
Because Sebastian looks like a Persian Jew you might have gone to school with.
I think I know
You know,
plenty
like-
of people who look like Jerry Seinfeld.
So doesn't he have that look though? Like,
Kinda.
I know he looks very Italian, but he also kind of could pass for a great neck kid.
Yeah, he looks like a guy who does like patio tiling and has made a fortune doing it. He owns like a patio company.
He
pays-
doesn't have an. I mean, he has a. This bothers me. People bother me. People.
But he
doesn't
loves
have an
people.
arrogance.
He loves
yes,
people.
there's a
He
love
loves-
for people.
yeah.
All of it vents on
But
stage.
even you think Larry David has a love for people?
No, he's cranky.
He is,
cranky.
right?
Yeah.
So why doesn't that bother me? Because he doesn't bother me at all.
Because he's not as successful as Jerry. I don't know.
Oh, you think he's way more successful? Yeah.
Probably you're right. Because he strikes you as less powerful. He's like, he's always getting beaten around and not in control. And maybe there's a part of you that connects with his
I wonder.
frailness
I just
and
don't-
weakness and
I
vulnerability.
don't like the Jerry inside myself. That's what it's all about.
Okay, that's what it is.
Yeah, I guess so.
So shout out to Jerry Seinfeld. Love to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, come on the show, Jerry.
to
We'd love
hash
to
it out
have
with
you
Michael.
anytime.
A guy like him couldn't give less of a shit about this podcast. Like, I don't think there's anyone else.
No, he literally, like some people you imagine they read the comments and like, they don't like the negative ones. It kind of like ruins their day a little. Like I don't think he would care.
You know
He'd
what
care
it-
0%.
But you know what? Okay, we have to close on this point on Jerry to put a cap on this.
Okay.
To me, what is appealing that you might not be understanding is he has a roasting energy to him. You know when you watch a roast of somebody and they're
Yeah.
being an asshole, but like on purpose, calling out the truth of different things? Look at this guy. And they're being
Like a Patrice O'Neill sort of character.
sort of, yeah. And they're just being brutally honest to the point where it's like refreshing and funny.
Yeah.
And Jerry has that. And I think it can be confused with arrogance or condescension, but he's just like, what are we doing? Always in the moment roasting. And
I
it's
don't
not
think
from a
it's
place of love.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what bothers
I think
you.
that is what
Patrice is one of the greats. Oh, gosh. Would
Best
he
of
be
all
huge
time.
right now?
Oh my! I
he's so
think about it
anti-famous?
often. I think about it often how he would have a podcast.
But Tim wouldn't.
He had a great. Someone just told a story. I think maybe Nate Bargatze or something,
Okay.
where he was in a room like joking around with Patrice O'Neill, and he made a joke, and Patrice just looked at him and went, "Ugh," and looked away. He didn't even give him the
Who's
dignity
Nate
of a
Bargatze again?
response.
I'm blanking on.
He's like a Southern
Oh, yes,
comedian.
yes,
He just had a special on Netflix.
But was he joking, Patrice, or not?
No, I don't
It was
think
also
so.
in that show, The
He's
Green Room on Showtime, because Bob Saget kept like just piggybacking off of people and
Yeah.
joking. And then he goes, okay, wait. Roseanne, stop. Bob, say something attached to what she just said. Come on. That's what you've been doing. And just calling it out. He would have
would've been
thrived
the
in
best.
the independent comics environment
Yeah.
where he could just start his own podcast,
Exactly.
Tim Dillon style,
Answers to no one.
and answer to no one because he was so anti-industry, so hostile towards it. He would have done so well.
If he had lived like 1 or 2 more years, right? When did Marin start his podcast?
If he was alive now, I'm just saying, I think he'd be huge in that
Yeah.
space. It's sad to see someone who didn't
And-
was about to arrive home
Yeah.
for what they do.
And what he's so good at, and what Chappelle is so good at, and I don't know if we have time, but I want to talk about what that movie Don't Look Up, I think really fails at, is really boiling down something to its essence and just busting your mind open and being like, that's the thing. And like, now I can move forward and take that kind of insight and do something with it.
That's a big nonsensical statement that we have to dissect because
Yeah,
I
so-
understand what you're saying. I think, but
So did you see Don't Look Up?
no.
Okay, so it's...
I made my parents watch it while they were babysitting. It had like 2.5 hours on.
Yeah.
So I put it on before we hacked the babysitting really well. They came
Yeah.
over. I had popcorn ready. Mom's like, "Oh, it's not a favor. It's like a treat to babysit for us." I said, "Here, look. Did you see this movie?" And once they hit 70, you just put anything on and they'll just do it. They don't. It's an Apple TV. So my mom's like, "I don't know how to do this." Where I'm like, just leave
Yeah.
it. It's playing. It's already playing. Oh, okay. So I just left it at 2.5 hours. So I knew we have 2.5 hours to go out.
Yeah.
And then we come back, and they looked like they were sleeping watching it, but they weren't. They're just so docile. I peeked through the window to see how much time we had left.
Yeah.
And on our way home, we walked in, and they're just like, I thought they were passed out, but then my dad and mom were just like this.
Yeah. They'll watch anything.
Anything. It's the moving pictures.
Yeah.
They'll watch
No,
anything.
my mom's the same way. My mom has like it's wild what the array of stuff she watches.
She doesn't know.
Yeah, she's like, do you see that movie Coda? Like the movie about the deaf people? She's like, yeah, it was all right. She watches like literally anything Apple TV puts in front of her. She'll watch and she'll watch it. It's quite amazing.
It's like aging. It's the circle of life, because when the babies are babies, you put anything in front of them, and my 1.5-year-old, I'm sure yours was just like. So your parents become these infants, and you're just like, here, a screen with moving pictures. Oh, what's this? I don't know. There was something on.
Yeah.
So anyway, we put that on, but that was Don't Look Up.
Did they like it?
They don't know. I came home. My dad's like, it's just a little bit goofy, a little goofy. It was like something environmental. It had its. My dad definitely picked up on liberal vibes,
Yeah.
He was like, it was a little goofy.
Like,
They
like, did you like it? That was Netflix, right? Yeah, I like Netflix. All right.
And then my mom's like, it wasn't serious. But she doesn't know what she was watching. I think that's her word for I didn't follow.
Like, was that a movie or a TV show?
I don't think it was meant to be serious. This is a good note to go out on. That's parents in their 70s watching movies. It's foolproof.
Yeah.
Put on 2.5. So I decided next time, since they can't remember which movies they've seen or not seen, I'm just going to put on The Irishman every time they babysit, because it's 4 hours long, and I'll have the whole night free. What is this? Is that De Niro? How come he looks younger? How come he looks older? They don't even have Brooklyn accents, but I'm starting to just.
Is this old? Is it new?
I don't know. Did we see this already? It's amazing. But you were saying.
Well, it's a long point. I don't know how much more time.
Oh, it was just about that Patrice O'Neill.
Well, Don't Look Up. Oh. Like, I think it really failed to. I think it's sort of like billed as a satire. Like, truly, it's just a lampoon. They're just sort of. It's what SNL does. They're just saying the thing that's happening,
right,
without any sort of like satires where there's like a really sharp insight,
a point of view
that you can take with you to better understand
South
it.
Park.
This was just sort of mirroring, and I think that's the problem people had with it. It was like the media is messed up, the government's messed up, politicians are messed up. If a comet came, it would be messed up, and we're like, yeah, we know. But like, I don't want to sit through 2.5 hours of that. I can just watch CNN. Whereas Patrice, and I think what Chappelle does with that like 8.5 minute special he did, he's not just saying we have a problem in this country with police police abuses. He's able to, and I think it's what comedians do well. I don't even remember what he said, but like
diagnose it, offer insight.
Yeah, exactly. And Patrice was like so good at that. And like I think that's what we want from movies like Don't Look Up. To like, we all know climate change is an issue, but say something in a way that'll change something.
Or make you think.
And you didn't do that. You just said it's a problem and we can't fix it. And we're like, well, thanks. Whereas when Patrice broke down a problem, you're like
he would say, you know what it is? Here's what you haven't thought of yet that I thought of potentially.
Right.
Maybe you have.
And sort of enact change in some way, perhaps, because you're diagnosing the problem.
It's like if you went to a doctor and he just described all your symptoms to you, but didn't give you anything. So you're not feeling well.
Exactly.
You have a cold. Your nose is stuffed. Your leg is bummed. You have muscle spasms. Okay, bye. You're like, what?
Yeah.
Can't move anywhere from there.
Right. And that's what the movie was, and it's disappointing because Adam McKay is great. You have the best actors in the world. You have no budget.
That's what happens.
And it's like this is what you're giving
Adam
us.
McKay is
he's the guy. He was Will Ferrell's former partner, and he did Vice and The Big Short, and now he did this.
I'm noticing with a lot of these things too. I'm guilty of admitting I watched that new revamp of Sex and the City. That first episode was
and just like that.
And just like that, which is also just everyone looks awful. They look terrible. It's just, what are you doing, guys? Like, think of something else. Like, reliving everything is just nostalgia rehash. But what was really bad about it was they just, by checklist, mentioned every modern thing that exists. Woke, woke moment, woke. They just started mentioning things. Somebody's just making a TikTok, and everything is just like, see, we're caught up, Yeah. And then like there's a professor and not Miranda. No, Miranda? Who's the redhead?
She has a friend.
She has like an African American professor, and she starts like stumbling her words, and like it's just like highlighting everything, but they're like checking off every modern issue, every modern social issue, without any story or any finesse, and you're just like, oh, you're desperately trying to appeal to the now and say, what would these women be like with Sex in the City? But they're 70 years old.
And so there's a remedy for that situation. A show called Station 11 on HBO now is whatever that problem is. A show like Station 11, it's about a worldwide pandemic that they started before the pandemic. So get through the first episode. The first episode's like rough, but get through it. And like that's an example of just like after a minute and a half, like that Louis joke I talked about last time, you're just in. You're not aware that you're watching a TV show. You're not aware of like the issues they're getting at. It's just like a story, and you're in it and you're engaged. And like that's how if you want to change something like climate change, give people something like that. Because like a story can really change things. Just listing off
Station
the problems
11.
is not
that's
gonna
the rec going into
do
22.
anything.
Hit and run. Fauda season 4. If you want to just watch Daron, pretend you're watching Daron from Fauda for a while, but pay attention to nothing else, I do Hit and Run. Otherwise, it's a no. Enough said on that.
So quickly, wait, before we go, you started with breaking down your 2021.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to?
Reflecting on 2021, what I'm happy with.
Because I cut you off with all my questions.
Yeah, but 2022 going in?
Yeah, what'd you want to say?
Nothing.
Okay. 2020, baby.
2022 is really about the technical side of, I say phase 2 of whatever I've been able to build over the last year. Phase 2, continue what I'm doing. I'd like to do more high-res stuff, put more resources and energy into some of the sketches and funny bits, grow this podcast, continue that audience, but continue to grow that audience. And that's really about just keeping putting out episodes. And this is episode 12, and episode 13 will be in the new year, 2022. So we'll say enough on that, but 2022 is yet to come, so we'll have to see what happens. It's just about applying ourselves consistently.
Okay.
That's Buckle Up, episode 12.
Happy New Year. Last week, everybody.
Well said, Michael.